my name is Dr. Holly Barchman. I am the mom of 3 boys, and I'm a family wellness chiropractor in Ajax I've been in practice for about 15 years. So my husband and I own Dynamic Balance Chiropractic. And my focus in practice is really on women and children. I have a big practice with pregnancy and with babies, specifically with breastfeeding difficulties. So I'm seeing a lot of women with in that postpartum period and knowing the challenges that they're facing. As a chiropractor, I am always, when I'm working with people, we're talking about the 3 stresses. And the 3 stresses that we face are physical, chemical, and emotional. And really, there can't really be a better time to really encapsulate all 3 of those stresses than pregnancy, birth, postpartum period. It literally, you get all 3 all the time. So I'm going to go into those just a little bit before we bring Heather on so that you guys understand what all those stresses, how they're interacting with you. So physical stress, that's pretty easy for most people to understand, especially during pregnancy. And that's really the time that chiropractors tend to see people in the beginning. So your body is changing, you're growing a human being, and then you have to get that human being out of your body. And that's another physical stress too, right? So our bodies are going through this like miraculous event in order to bring this human being to the world. And so your body, goes through a lot with that. And then after birth, you're taking care of this human. They're totally dependent on you. You're feeding them, you're holding them, you're doing all of these different things for them, carrying their gear, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of physical stress on the body. That's very easy for us to understand. Chemical stress, I can pretty much sum that up with one word for the antenatal period. So pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And that word is hormones. Like your hormones are constantly fluctuating. You're getting surges where, in pregnancy, your body gets hormonal surges in order to accommodate for the baby. During delivery, you are, of course, having hormonal surges to get the baby out. Then at postpartum, we have hormones that are ebbing and flowing to have you bond with your baby as well as to create milk for them. So that brings us, though, to the last stress, which is the one with emotional stress, which is the one that for some reason we don't want to talk about. And it's unfortunate because it's just as important as the other 2, and it's just as prevalent as the other 2. But for some reason, it's something that is more taboo for us to talk about. We want to talk like everything is great and mothering is wonderful and we're enjoying every minute of it, when really that's not always the case. And it's the one thing that really connects us as mothers, is that we are going to have to navigate emotional stress with our children forever. It changes over time, and we just have to learn how to navigate that as we come to each stage. So if we're not talking about it, it can be really, really hard. It can be raw, and it can very much feel lonely at times. Then you add in a global pandemic, and suddenly we have these stay-at-home orders, we are isolated, we're told to social distance, all of our medical services are shut down, and or they've been changed, and our providers aren't really there for us in the way that they have been before. Mom groups are shut down right now, so it really leaves us in this isolated place. So I've been seeing that as a chiropractor who works with a lot of women postpartum, and I've just seen the toll that that's taken on my patients in general. So lots of depression and anxiety, but oh my gosh, really in that postpartum period. So I thought, you know what, we have to unpack this, and we have to bring in an expert to talk to us about this, and like, what can we be doing right now, and what should we be looking for? So that's where I asked my lovely friend Heather here to join us, and I'm just going to read to you her bio so you know how brilliant this woman is and her skill set and all the knowledge that she brings to the table. So here we go. Okay, Heather Ratych is a registered social worker and psychotherapist who offers teletherapy to women. So, guys, she was doing this virtual consultation and teletherapy way before COVID made it cool. She is one of the things that I've always loved, because when you're in that postpartum period, sometimes it's really hard to get out places, and is a great solution for many women. She specializes in perinatal mental health and sees women through the fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, and parenting phases of life. She provides a holistic model of care, meaning she recognizes the whole person and works with women to address the spectrum of issues in their lives. People see her to work through a wide range of issues and concerns. Heather's also a mom of 3 who is passionate about helping mothers thrive and supporting women to feel grounded, confident, and connected. She's a woman and child rights advocate and an alternative health enthusiast and lover of adventure, travel, and the outdoors. She loves building connections, forming authentic, supportive relationships, and witnessing growth and transformation. So welcome, Heather. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for asking me to do this.
I'm excited because we've wanted to do this for a long time, and COVID gave us the opportunity, weirdly. So I guess thanks, COVID. So from what I was saying about what I'm noticing in practice, is that what your experience has been too? Like, have you seen this surge of just depression and anxiety disorders just really hitting?
Absolutely. So we know, depression and anxiety or mood disorders postpartum are extremely prevalent anyways. And I think they're often underreported. So the research that I follow shows us that approximately 1 in 5 women will experience a mood disorder postpartum, which is a significant number already. There are so many factors that we can get into around why that is so. And we also know that about 1 in 3 will likely experience a mood disorder throughout their lifetime. So these numbers are staggering anyways. And we know that it's not often, these sort of feelings or postpartum issues or anything to do with mood or, like you said, emotional awareness or how we're feeling, they can bring up lots of different feelings, often shame or guilt, which means they're not then talked about at play dates or at the hockey rink or at the park or anywhere else that we might be as women.
Right.
And then we get more isolated because we think we're the only ones feeling this way.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing, is that shame piece, the shame and the guilt.
Absolutely.
And that's something that, maybe prevents us from having these conversations if you don't have a close group that you feel safe to talk with.
Absolutely. And we see, I'm going to talk a little bit more in a little while around the impact of social media, but we know the role that plays in making us feel even more sort of isolated or alone, even though we're seeing others and sort of parts of their lives, snippets of their lives, but then we're seeing the best parts, and our brains don't always immediately recognize that people aren't sharing all of their real lives. They're just sharing the beautiful parts most often. And so it can be really hard to navigate, and that leaves people feeling as if you already weren't feeling isolated and alone postpartum. If you're experiencing some kind of mood disorder or just not feeling like yourself, those feelings are completely heightened. There's society plays a huge role in that. The expectations on women are extraordinary. We have such a high level of responsibilities. There's a huge difference between how we parent versus how our parents or our mothers parented. Not even comparable. The stressors, not to deny it was stressful then, but it's increased tenfold. The lack of support. We're doing this alone. Really, we don't have a parenting village like we used to in generations past. So we're already in somewhat of isolation. And there's this new, I don't know how new it is, but there's this desire that sort of comes, that society is sort of perpetuating, that the idea of the perfect mother exists and that we should all strive to be her.
That we have to do everything.
And do it right and perfectly all the time.
Yeah.
At the same time. So then we know that anybody can be affected by mood disorders postpartum. And there's lots of sort of other factors that can contribute to increasing your risk. And nobody would have thought a global pandemic would be one of those, because that's not in the research.
Right. Yeah.
So we add in COVID, essentially. And I'm definitely seeing both an increase in frequency of perinatal mood disorders or mental health issues, as well as the intensity. And I think in my practice, the intensity is what's most noticeable.
I would agree there too. Are you
It's
noticing it change at all over time?
um, there has been a bit of a change. There's been a shift. So as the province, again, this is only from my own perspective, but as the province has been sort of loosening regulations or reopening slowly, some kind of more normal, quote unquote, activities are resuming. And so then there is, for some people, that's lessening anxiety because there is sort of the resumption of social contact with some people, or having people to come and visit if you have a new baby that hasn't yet met your family.
Right.
That is sort of starting to happen, which for some women is easing some of those issues. But for others, the fear and anxiety around health and safety, as well as the fear of judgment from others, has increased and intensified as concerns around possible exposure increase. Anxiety around keeping babies safe, I think, has been on the rise for mothers over the past few years. Again, I think there's an impact of media and social media that sort of has a role to play there. But this has really been heightened for those who are expecting or who are giving birth, or currently pregnant, postpartum, during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Those fears are really intensified. We know that anxiety causes people to want to experience a level of control. We feel, when we're anxious, we feel like if I can control my environment or what's happening, other people, what's happening around me, I will feel safe. This is what our brain tells us.
Right.
And so when we're feeling a lack of control, anxiety is going to increase.
And
who isn't feeling lack of
no
control?
Right. Literally no control right now at all.
Literally none. And then as the province begins to reopen, those who have felt a sense of physical safety while completely isolating at home are bound to feel heightened worry, because their brains have also made the connection unintentionally that the outside world is scary and is a place to be feared.
Right.
And so even though this isn't an intentional sort of thought or connection, it's there. And we have to work through that piece now, like we haven't ever had to before.
And,
really.
And as a therapist, I mean, this isn't in the textbooks, right? Like, how do you help to reintegrate people after a global pandemic and global lockdown? Really?
Right. Yeah. It's new territory for all of us, right? And I think there's also a bit of an assumption that others know what they're doing and we don't.
Right.
Which there is, I think, with parents. Like, Holly, you can probably relate to this. For myself, I can. With parenting, there's a lot of that belief anyways, that I'm the only one who's floundering and has no idea what the heck I'm doing.
All the time. Yeah.
At all times. Right. And we all just kind of keep that to ourselves. So nobody really knows that we're all feeling the same way.
We all fake it and say,
right.
That's great. Yeah.
Totally. But also in a time or an age when information has been thrown at us at a rapid pace, much more quickly than we can digest it. Mothering has turned into this enormous competition. It's fueled by experts, with my air quotes there. And with the influx of news lately, and then the start of COVID, people have been scrambling to try and figure out how to keep their families and themselves safe. But then they're constantly hearing about what others are doing, which then creates this feeling of self-doubt and more heightened worry.
Do you find it almost like pins us against one another too? Like,
I think unintentionally, because in a time like this, we have to remember that we're fearful. When we're fearful, we're trying to regain this control, but sometimes we're not able, like we said, to control what's happening around us. And then the sort of the impact that social media or the media has, I think social media, especially on this piece, is that in an attempt to feel like we're in control, we measure ourselves against others. So am I taking as many precautions as she is? Is my family as safe as hers? Should I stock up on as much toilet paper as she has just to make sure that I'm safe? And we create this mental checklist of the things that we're doing in order to make us feel like we're as safe as possible.
I feel like you need to say that again, because that was a really important point about that. In order to make ourselves, say it again. In order to
make ourselves feel safe, we measure ourselves against others.
Right.
And then we see, so we do all of the things, and then we see another mom's post. And when we learn that she's doing less than we are, how do we feel? We feel safe. because compared to her, I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
So our family is safe. And then when we determine, when we determine by her posts or what she's sharing, or the articles that she's sharing, or that kind of thing, that she's doing more than we are, how do we feel?
Right.
Like we're not as safe. Our level of risk has not changed at all, but we draw this conclusion that if she's doing more than I am, then I'm not doing enough, and therefore I'm at risk.
Right.
When we look at that rationally, we say nothing has changed other than our perception, essentially.
Yeah.
And this perpetuates the social media anxiety cycle. We've seen that for years prior to COVID, but it's really coming into play now.
Right.
So really, on that note, if I can offer anything today, please let it be that in times of worry like this, when we feel out of control and we feel like we're not sure what to do next, turn to anything other than social media.
Oh my God, it's so hard to.
It's so hard, but our brains, without us intentionally thinking these thoughts, our brains go there. And they make this automatic connection that isn't a truth. It's just a story.
Yes.
And we our bodies and our brains perceive that as fact.
Yeah. And it's even harder, I feel, right now, because we're trying to gain connection, especially when everything was like the very beginning of the lockdown. We're trying to gain connection, and social media gives you that false perception of connection. And so it's almost like, oh, I can see what all my friends are doing right now if I scroll through my feed, but that might not be actually real life. You know what I mean?
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, we know, but we don't know, or we don't remember that even if when things are going on in the world, if we turn away from social media and media in general, we believe again that we're not going to know what's happening.
Right.
But I promise you, and you know this, that other people will reach out and tell you, likely in their own attempt to find a feeling of safety. They want to know what you're doing. And so you're going to hear what's happening.
It's true.
Even if you're not looking for it.
So, okay, how would I know if I'm a brand new mom, I just had a baby, how do I know the emotions that I'm feeling are not just baby blues?
Right. I'm going to put a couple of slides up for this because I really wanted us to cover some of this in really good detail. So I'm just going to share my screen here. There we go. Can you see it okay?
Yep.
Okay, amazing. So baby blues, people are usually somewhat familiar with the term, at least, baby blues, because it is something that's often talked about either during pregnancy or in the early postpartum days, either by your healthcare professionals or just in whatever you're reading. So it's a commonly used term. So we know that up to 80% of new mothers do get the baby blues. A short-term dip in mood caused by all of the different changes that come with a new baby and that huge hormonal crash that happens. So it's super common, happens to most people. It often begins when baby is as early as sort of 2 to 3 days old, 2 to 3 days postpartum. And a classic sign of baby blues is that it's usually, or it should feel better. You should feel sort of back to almost your new self by the time baby's 2 to 3 weeks old, without having much intervention, other than some extra rest and support, that kind of thing. Right. Your mood can swing quickly from happy to sad. I sort of laugh, right? I was actually, my oldest was looking through this presentation earlier today, and he said, what does that mean? Like one moment you're thinking that you're doing so great, and the next time you're crying. And I said, it's actually exactly like that. You can look at your baby and just be overcome with emotion and start laughing really hard and have no idea what's happening. So normal, so normal. You may not feel like eating or taking care of yourself because you're so exhausted, but again, that's a temporary period of time, and then appetite should resume, and the feeling of exhaustion will shift when baby starts sleeping, essentially.
Right.
You might feel irritable, overwhelmed, and anxious. But the key sort of point to be aware of is that if these feelings of sadness last longer, like past that 2 to 3 week mark, or become worse, they should start to feel better as sort of the time goes on. But if they're not, if your mood is declining and not improving, then it's likely time to seek out some further intervention.
Okay.
So that 2 to 3 week mark is a really good, sort of the biggest indicator.
Right.
That for sure. And then in contrast, perinatal mood disorders. So we know that postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and there's a few other postpartum mood disorders that are identifiable. They're less common. Anxiety and depression are sort of the two most common that people will experience. They share a large number of sort of symptoms or characteristics. So over the last few years, they've been lumped into what's called perinatal mood disorders. So that can mean sort of the whole gamut of mood disorders that exist. So when I'm referring to PMDs, that's sort of what I'm talking about. So a woman may be diagnosed with a perinatal mood disorder if the symptoms last more than 2 to 3 weeks, have a significant impact on a woman's functioning and day-to-day life. And they may make it difficult for her to carry out daily activities and care for the baby. But as we're going to talk about, it's not always sort of what we expect when we think depression.
Right.
So for myself, after I had my first, my mood definitely shifted, but I thought, well, I'm not crying all the time. I'm able to get out of bed. I keep busy and I see people and I'm extremely social. So I think I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. And I didn't identify that for probably 2 more children, realistically. Because the symptoms they really vary between women. And it doesn't mean that any symptoms are worse or better. They impact us all really differently. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time, or a chunk of time, just talking about some of the common symptoms, but also some of the less common or talked about symptoms, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
And I have quite a list, so we'll kind of go through some of these. And I'm happy, as you said, if people have questions, it's difficult, obviously, to answer questions like, do you think I have this? But if there's a question around one of these symptoms that we're talking about here, happy to sort of get into more detail as needed too. So everyone's welcome to do that.
So if you have a question, just pop it in that chat box. And when Heather comes to kind of a natural resting place, I'll just read out the question to her then.
Amazing. Okay. Yeah, perfect. So one of the big ones, racing thoughts. So your thoughts are racing. You can't quiet your mind. You can't settle down and you can't relax.
I feel like I have this all the time.
All the time. Yeah, same. We're a work in progress, Holly.
My youngest is 5, but I have postpartum depression.
Right. Still.
Yes.
And anxiety for sure.
Totally.
And then leading to next, you feel like you have to be doing something all of the time. Cleaning bottles, washing baby clothes, cleaning the house, doing work, entertaining the baby, taking the kids for a walk, baking muffins.
Right.
I remember going to labor with my second, and my first thought was, oh my gosh, my poor firstborn is no longer going to be my only child. And what am I going to do about that? So while I was in early labor, I was baking everything that I could think of. You know that I'm a baker anyways, but I thought if he wakes up in the morning and he has muffins, everything is going to be okay.
Oh, I love it. I love that was your solution.
That was my solution, right? I didn't even question it.
Here's a huge life change, buddy, but here's a muffin.
Here's a muffin. Mommy still loves you. Mommy still loves you, right? You're worried, like really worried all of the time. No matter what anybody says to you, it doesn't help you. So will my partner come home from work, or am I going to have to do this alone? Is the baby going to wake up? Should I take a nap right now, or will there be enough time by the time I fall asleep, baby's going to wake up? Is the baby eating enough? Is there something wrong with the baby that I'm missing? No matter what anybody says to reassure you, you don't feel reassured.
Okay.
And often with anxiety, the worry jumps. So It might be around sleep, and then when we manage that, it moves to something different. So a really classic sign of anxiety is that constant worry, which again, we probably all experience to some extent.
Just motherhood, yeah.
Right, just motherhood. You might be having disturbing thoughts that you've never had before, scary thoughts that might make you wonder if you ever should have done this, if you're the person that you thought you were, if you're cut out to be a mother. They may fly into your head completely unexpected and unwanted. You know that they're not right and that it's not the real you, but you feel terrified by the thoughts and they just won't go away. They might start with words like, what if, for many of us, and they are completely normal. but are extremely scary for
Yeah.
women. And people, this is a big one that people do not talk about.
Yeah. I was just
Because
going to say, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like there's periods that everybody feels that way for even for a snippet of time. So
Absolutely.
is this that's a pervasive thought that you're having?
A pervasive. So we call them intrusive thoughts. So
Right.
they're thoughts that feel really bothersome. Sometimes you might just have one. It might be the same thought over and over again,
Okay.
or so often they're around safety issues and keeping baby safe.
Yeah.
I don't like to say any examples of them because we know that helps people to then
Right.
start having these thoughts themselves. But they're fears that happen or images that come to mind that make us feel really uncomfortable. And then often our brain says, you're having these thoughts because you're crazy,
Mm-hmm.
or you're having these thoughts, which means that you're going to act on them,
Right.
which aren't true. But because our brain tells us that, we hesitate to talk to other people. There's this fear that if I say it, someone's going to take my baby away.
Yeah.
If I tell someone how I'm feeling, they're going to think that I'm not cut out to be a mother. All of these different things that come to mind.
Yeah.
And we know this is a really common thing that happens to people. And with intervention, we can help the thoughts to disappear, to be minimized a great deal. And we can help to assure that you start to believe that these are just thoughts and you're not going to act on them,
Right. Okay.
essentially. You're afraid to be alone, you're afraid to be alone with the baby because of these thoughts is another one. You may also be afraid of things around the house. So objects or that kind of thing, because they remind you of the thoughts and they make you think that you might act on the thoughts. Also really common. You might feel the need to check things constantly. A lot of the women that I work with experience this symptom. Did I lock the door? Did I lock the car? Did I turn off the oven? Is the baby breathing? Did I unplug the hair straightener? Even though you can lie in bed and know, I didn't cook today, so the oven wouldn't be on.
Yeah.
The thoughts can come to mind and become so intense that you feel like I just need to go and check so that I can go to sleep.
I used to feel all the time that whenever I would have a shower, I would hear the baby crying.
Totally. That phantom crying,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And then you come out of the shower and you're like, no, they're not crying. And
They're
back in
fine.
the shower. Yeah, that happened all the time.
Attempts to your shower, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. So common. Sadness. So you might feel sadness to the depths of your soul, sadness or despair that you've never felt before.
Mm-hmm.
You might not be able to stop crying, even when there's no real reason to be crying. That can happen. That does happen. You may not know why you're crying or know why you feel sad. And then
Right.
your brain does this funny thing where it says, you shouldn't feel sad. You have a new baby. Why are you feeling sad?
Right.
And
There's
this can
huge shame.
perpetuate.
Yeah. Huge shame and guilt.
Huge shame and guilt.
Mm-hmm.
You feel hopeless, like the situation will never get better. You feel weak and defective, like a failure. My baby will never sleep. I'll never get rest. I'm never going to feel like myself again. I'm
Right.
not cut out to be a mom.
Yeah.
This is sort of the anxiety spiral. You may have physical symptoms, stomach cramps, headache, shakiness, nausea. You might even have panic attacks. For me, I know I go right to, when I experience symptoms of anxiety, headache or neck pain.
Mm-hmm.
You probably see this a lot in your practice, people coming in with those physical symptoms of shoulders raised and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
and the impact of that.
Yeah.
You may have trouble sleeping. You're tired, but you can't sleep, even though the baby's sleeping. So any sleep disturbance that's not related to baby is typically a really classic sign of a perinatal mood disorder.
Okay.
If you're just up all night because your baby's up all night, that's different.
Right.
But if baby's sleeping and you're lying awake, then that just might be one sign or symptom to sort of have some further conversations.
Right. Okay.
Another one is that you know something is wrong. You think that you've gone crazy, but you just don't know what it is. There's no label for it. You can't really identify it. It's just something doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And then you're afraid that if you reach out, that people will judge you, or that your baby will be taken away. Another really common one as well.
Right. Okay.
A few more here.
Mm.
Oh, sorry, I lost them. So you could feel overwhelmed and not like, hey, this new mom thing is kind of hard. More like, I can't do this. I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm not cut out to be a mom. That type of overwhelm. You might feel like you just can't handle being a mother at all. You might be wondering whether you should have become a mother in the first place. So that overwhelm can be really intense.
Yes. Yeah.
I know for myself, when I had my third in 3.5 years, at one point I looked to my husband at probably at 3 a.m. and said, I think we made a terrible mistake.
Yeah.
And he said, it's too late.
Yeah.
And in that, and I laughed so much. Now we both laugh about it now, but in that moment I felt this hopelessness, like, you're right, it's too late. I have no other option but to do this.
To just do
and
it.
I really don't want to do it.
Yes.
Like a feeling of being stuck.
Yeah. And again, those are those things that just are not talked about.
Not at all.
That's not the stuff that gets talked about at the mommy and me group. And and this is the stuff that people, I think, then feel caught off guard with when they experience it themselves. And then it starts that cycle of shame and blame and guilt that you're like, wow, I'm a horrible person. Why am I feeling these things?
Right. Because I'm here
baby
at the play date that says, I love being a mom. This is everything I ever wanted.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Huge.
And then we feel defective, right? That cycle continues. You feel guilty because you believe you should be handling new motherhood better than this. You might feel like your baby deserves better. You worry about whether your baby can tell that you're feeling so bad, or that you're crying too much, or you don't feel the happiness or connection that you thought that you would, or that others told you that you would. You might wonder if your baby would be better off without you, which can be a really difficult one to feel, obviously.
Yeah.
You may not feel bonded to your baby. It isn't what you expected. Not everyone with postpartum depression feels this way, but many do, especially at certain times. Irritation and anger. These are sort of really common symptoms that are not the classic symptoms that we hear about, or that are talked about, or that we see portrayed in film or TV or that kind of thing about new motherhood. You might have zero patience at all. Everything annoys you. You feel resentment towards your baby, your partner, your friends who don't have babies, your in-laws, and it's like an out of control rage.
Right.
And it can be really hard to identify because we don't often link that to depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
But for people who haven't ever been in touch with the feeling of anxiety, or what that feels like in their body, often that can look like anger.
Right.
It can come out as anger, essentially. Or you might feel nothing. You might feel complete emptiness and numbness, like you're just going through the motions. You might not be able to bring yourself to eat, or perhaps on the alternative, that you can't stop eating. That you feel like that's the only place that you can derive comfort from, is through sort of food or any other kind of substance, possibly.
Right.
Sleep, we sort of already talked about. You can't concentrate, you can't focus, you can't think of the words that you want to say, you can't remember what you're supposed to be doing or what you went downstairs for, you can't make a decision, you feel like you're living in a complete fog, in a big disc, like there's been like a piece of plexiglass
right.
between you and the world, essentially.
Very timely.
Figuratively and literally, right? Or maybe you know that you're doing everything right. You're exercising, you're taking your vitamins, you have a healthy spirituality, you practice yoga, and you're thinking, why can't I just get over this? You feel like you should be able to snap out of it, but you just can't, and you don't know why. So for those of us who are doers, we may be doing all of those things, and I'm thinking, why isn't this working?
Right. Why doesn't this feel good?
Absolutely. Because for many of us, type A personalities, we think, I can fix this. I can make myself feel better. And then we do the things, right? I've got this. Absolutely. You might have thoughts of running away and leaving your family behind. Or you thought of driving off the road, taking too many pills, any other kind of way to sort of end the misery that you're in. Again, not often talked about. And there's a spectrum of this as well. So I know for myself, when my husband would come in from work in the evening, I would look at the door and I would just have images of running out of it and never coming back. This idea of, I just need to run really fast.
Yeah.
And you can leave all of this behind.
Right.
Whereas for some, those thoughts may lead into, I just shouldn't be here. How do I end this? And if those kinds of thoughts are coming up, then they're definitely signs and symptoms that you need help right now,
Right.
essentially.
Right.
The biggest one, though, that I really want to highlight and that everybody needs to hear is that you don't have to have any of these symptoms, but if you just don't feel like yourself, that's enough. That's enough. This journey isn't supposed to feel treacherous.
Right.
I mean, we never know what to expect because this is such a new road for all of us as we enter parenthood. But parenting doesn't have to be this hard.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
just doesn't. It is very hard, but you aren't a bad mom for feeling like this is not what you expected.
Right.
Because
So
I don't think any of us expected it to be so hard.
no. I have a question for you here.
Yeah.
So how can someone who is happy being a mother not make other people with these symptoms feel bad about themselves?
That's a really great question.
So like how to be a support, I guess.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is the awareness that everybody wants to be happy being a mom. And for most people, even if you're experiencing postpartum depression and anxiety that is pretty severe, at your core, much of the time you are feeling happy being a mother or happy with your decision. But these symptoms might cloud that at times and make things feel really difficult. But I think the biggest thing that we can do to support one another, wherever we kind of fall on that spectrum, is to just be honest
Mm-hmm.
and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
So even if you are feeling incredibly overjoyed in this new role and loving every minute of it, there are going to be lows for you. And speaking about those gives others permission to speak about them as well.
Yes. Oh, that's huge, I think.
It's huge. And because nobody's days are perfect.
No.
And you don't need to minimize your joy or experience to make others feel better. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But just recognizing that when we speak about the hard parts, others will speak about the hard parts.
Yes. Yes.
And that often people don't speak about the hard parts.
And then it makes us feel more connected instantly, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's just that vulnerability. So not only sharing the joys, please share the joys with your friends. Your friends want to hear that you're happy being a mom, even if they're not feeling that all the time.
Right.
It gives them something to sort of look forward to if they're identifying that this is sort of an issue.
Yeah.
But in those joys, also share the struggles as they arise. Even if your struggles feel small compared to somebody else's struggles, that's okay.
And not in a comparison way.
Absolutely.
Like you feel you know, want to run from your family. Oh, my baby peed on me this morning, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. So just recognizing that we all have joys and struggles, and you don't need to minimize your experience by any means, your joyful emotion or experience, to make others not feel bad.
Right.
But if you can be vulnerable, then do that. Or even just asking questions. I know for myself in my own personal life, I've recognized the value of saying, how are you? And not just, hey, how are you? But how are you really?
Yeah.
Or this parenting gig is a lot. How are you really doing?
Yes.
And sometimes that's enough for someone to just say, this is way harder than I thought.
Totally. So
and you can hold space even if you don't have the same experience.
Right. So this was a two-part question. So the second part is, what if you have some symptoms, but not all of them?
Most people will only have some symptoms. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but most people will not have all of these because that would be incredibly intense.
Right.
So if you have, again, this is not meant to diagnose anybody, but if you're experiencing sort of some of these symptoms and you feel like they're interfering with sort of the life that you want to be living, or with you feeling like you're getting the most out of this journey and feeling like yourself and feeling okay in this role, then that would be sort of the indicator that it's time to chat with somebody.
Right.
The women that I see, not all of them have a diagnosable mental health issue. People come to see me for all kinds of different reasons, and some may just be experiencing one or two of these symptoms or none of them, and they still find they still can find value in talking to somebody if there's an issue that is sort of pressing for them at the time.
Right.
So I don't want you to see this symptom list and make a diagnosis for yourself. Not by any means, but if you sort of, some of these are resonating with you and you had this sort of aching feeling that this isn't exactly what you thought it would be, or you're missing a piece of yourself right now, then that's a great starting point to say, maybe I should check into this a little bit further.
Right. Right. Okay, I have one more here that we'll take,
Yeah.
and we'll move on to the next piece.
Yeah.
So what about not wanting to be touched at times to the point where I get very irritated? My body is feeding my baby, then a playground for my toddler, showing love for my partner. Sometimes I go off the handle. Would you consider this a symptom?
Did you ever experience this, Holly? Because oh my gosh, that resonates with me so much.
We have, me too. We have a saying here where it's like, "Are you overtouched right now?" Because
Right.
it's a real thing, being overtouched.
It's a real thing. I remember one night sitting, like, after all of that had happened, kids were finally asleep for maybe, I don't know, I thought it might be half an hour. Baby wasn't nursing, and the dog, I was sitting down for the first time, and the dog came and put her head on my lap and gave me those little eyes like,
Yeah.
"Can you pet me?" And
Right.
I lost it.
Right.
I said, what do you need from me?
Yeah.
I have nothing left to give. And that is a completely normal response. As humans, we crave connection, but man, we can get touched out.
It can be a lot. It can be a
It can
lot
be
of
a lot.
connection all the time.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to talk a bit later about self-care, which will be an important piece of sort of managing this being touched out piece. But again, if you feel like I'm feeling touched out a lot and I feel like I could be managing that better, I don't know how, but I just want strategies, that's a great time to say, hey, I want to have a chat with somebody.
Yeah.
But just really increasing your self-care, to set really healthy boundaries, to say, I've given a lot today of my physical self and mom needs some space.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue point. Do you want to like go into that?
Yeah,
Like, what
absolutely.
do you do? What can we, if you're noticing you're having signs and symptoms like this, what is
Right.
something that you could do tomorrow to make your world just a little bit better?
Okay, absolutely. I don't have a slide yet. I'm going to move into that.
Oh, okay.
So
Did you have
first,
something before that then?
no, I don't. It's all good. It's all good. So first, just recognizing that this is not a normal time.
Right.
It's just not. Parenting in isolation is just not normal, and it's not okay, and it's not manageable for anybody, and nobody's doing it well. Everyone's just doing it and doing the best that we can under the circumstances. You're not failing. What you're being asked to do is just not humanly possible. So of course it doesn't feel good. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to grieve what you've lost. And no, it doesn't matter if somebody else has it worse than you. As women, we do this a lot, like this idea of try and be grateful, look on the bright side, count your blessings, look
Right.
at what you do have.
We do this comparative analysis all the time with everything, right?
Constantly. But the journey into motherhood, especially right now, is not what you expected. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's necessary to acknowledge this and all of the big feels and emotions that it brings, because it doesn't matter if it's harder for somebody else. It doesn't matter what somebody else is going through. And yeah, you can be grateful that you didn't get COVID in the hospital, and you can still really grieve the experience that you had.
Right.
At the same time. Sorry, I'm covering that with my hand there. So I'm going to just move into this one here. So
Sure.
When things are feeling really out of control, it's really important to discover what, like we talked about earlier, what is within our control. So one of the main areas we can focus on with this, where there's an opportunity to actually regain some sense of control despite what's happening around us, is with our thoughts. And this always seems crazy or too simplified for people. So just hear me out, because I get where everyone's minds are at. But recognizing that all of our thoughts are normal and natural, but what effect does a specific thought have on our behavior? So moving toward looking at our thoughts in terms of their function or how they affect behavior allows us then to regain some control over how we feel or the emotions that we're experiencing. So most often it's our own unrealistic or unreasonable thoughts that spark our stressed out reactions. So thinking about all of those things that are outside of our control and feeling completely overwhelmed by those. So when this happens, our thoughts can become like a hurricane, and can get out of control really easily. And I don't know about, I mean, everybody can probably relate, but we see this hurricane happen. So we have this thought and it may not be helpful. And then everywhere we look, we find more evidence to make this hurricane sort of continue and to pick up speed and to pick up more thoughts that then leave us feeling completely vulnerable, out of control, and an emotional mess, essentially.
Right.
So because when our thoughts spiral, our emotions become completely heavy and overwhelming. And it's hard then to rein ourselves back in and to look at what's within our control. So it's really important to pay attention to what we tell ourselves. So the messaging, the stories, the thoughts, what's going through our minds, and to learn to create more helpful thoughts. So anybody who's on here that I work with is thinking like, oh, she sounds like a broken record. It's a part of the therapeutic process, and it's helpful. It's what I tell people to use the most often at home. So for an example, let's say that you have this mile-long to-do list, and all you keep thinking is, I'm never going to get this done. Not a super helpful and might be even a damaging thought, as it can lead to extra distress and more anxiety, thinking, I'll never get it done. I'll never get it done. Most of the time, actually, thoughts like that paralyze us from actually problem solving and taking any action.
Right.
Move further from getting it done.
Yes.
So a great technique that can help you to manage these feelings of overwhelm is to challenge your thoughts. So change them if they're not helpful to you. So consider the example that I just mentioned. The thought is, I'm never going to get this done. So when a thought like this one that causes anxiety or overwhelm comes up for you, and it could be anything. I mean, there's so many thoughts that go through our minds in a day that cause or contribute to anxiety and overwhelm. If that comes up for you, just take a moment to pause and ask yourself, is this thought helpful? And sorry, I have a new slide here. So when you're saying, is this thought helpful? Just asking yourself in your mind, briefly consider, when I think this thought, what are the emotions or feelings that arise? Is there anxiety? Is there anger? Is there shame? Just a moment to sort of self-reflect and really questioning, when this thought comes to mind, what emotion sort of comes up. And then looking at your body and saying, what are the body sensations that I'm experiencing? So for me, again, like I was saying, it's tension in my shoulders, a bit of a headache. When I'm feeling that, it's a really good indicator that I need to look back and say, my physical body feels this. What emotion am I feeling right now?
Right.
And what thought was I having that might have contributed to this?
Oh, that's like music to my ears as a chiropractor.
I'm sure.
That evaluation piece, right?
Right. And the more we practice this, the more we are able to stop this cycle or this process from continuing, so that eventually the hope is we won't feel those physical symptoms.
Right.
If we're catching them earlier, it doesn't get to that point. So when you're looking at the body sensations, like just questioning, how do I act, or what does my behavior look like when I feel this? What's going on for me? So again, for me, it often looks like having much less patience, and I mean much less, with others, children and adults alike. Self-sabotaging behaviors, maybe giving up, putting things off, staying up way too late and burning myself out, thinking that I can get things done, only to feel even more exhausted and overwhelmed.
Right.
And then the final question to consider is there an alternative thought that will help to lead me to feel more positive emotions and body sensations, and that will impact my behavior? So it's really this idea of taking control of our thoughts, questioning, is this helpful? How do I feel when I think this thought? What happens within my body? What happens with my behavior? And is there a different thought that can make things feel differently, so that I act differently, behave differently, etc.? To think back to the example we were using, an alternative replacement thought might be, I know I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, but if I take a break, I might feel differently. Or it seems overwhelming to me right now, but if I break it down into smaller parts, it might be more doable.
Yeah.
Another one might be, I've had this feeling of overwhelm before, but I always seem to get things done. I just need to take it 1 hour at a time.
Right. It's a biggie.
right? So we can see how if we catch these unhelpful thoughts and replace them with thoughts that are more helpful, how we feel and changes, and then likely in turn, how we behave and what we experience in our bodies will change. Because if I say to myself, I always get things done even when I'm overwhelmed, I just need to break it down into smaller parts and it will happen.
Right.
We can imagine then that the feeling in our bodies is going to be different.
Yes. Yes.
If that makes
Sure.
sense.
Absolutely.
It's a
Absolutely.
big concept, but it's one that's really, I'd like to share it because it's something that it's tangible and you can practice this in your everyday life, because we all have overwhelm inducing thoughts multiple times an hour, I want to say.
Yeah, I think that's key. What you just said too is that it's something that you need to practice. It doesn't necessarily come
Absolutely.
totally naturally for all of us. And
Absolutely.
when we've not been taught to think and break things down that way, that's not a go-to.
Right. Our brain has become really skilled at automatically considering or perseverating on our unhelpful thoughts. So we have to create these new neural pathways and
Right.
reinforce them with practice
Yeah.
so that we can learn to automatically respond in healthier ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So Heather, there's another question here for you, but I just wanted to know where you're at with your flow of thinking here. Cause I don't want to, it's kind of got like a big component to it. So I don't know if
Right.
you
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
let
No,
me know.
go for it. Yeah,
Okay.
let's go for questions. That's great.
Okay. So this says, I had an emergency C-section due to my baby coming out face first with the cord around the neck, and I was scared that my baby wouldn't survive the surgery. I was already scared of birth prior to this. My baby is now 6 weeks old, and I would find myself crying for no reason. I was so happy seeing my mom or FaceTiming my friends, and then I would just cry at any time. I do find the crying has slowed down. It's not every day, but it still happens. What are some strategies?
So that's a really great question. So first of all, traumatic birth plays a huge role on our postpartum well-being, essentially mental and emotional well-being. So just recognizing that, of course, this is feeling overwhelming and intense right now
Mm-hmm.
because a trauma just happened, essentially, and your body and your mind are still trying to process that and make sense of it. In terms of strategies, it's probably helpful to process that with somebody. And most often a professional at this point in time. If you're still feeling quite teary and emotional, the isolation or the distancing is probably impacting that negatively, because you don't have that community and it's not being talked about likely as it might have been. But really just recognizing that trauma comes in all different forms and that it's normal. What you're feeling is normal. And there isn't one strategy necessarily, but it is important that you process what happened. I often suggest to people that journaling is a great place to start, to really, if you're able to, and you may not be able to, write out your birth story or write out the fears or the thoughts that you had during that time, because you might also, for many women,
Yeah.
the message is, if you had a healthy baby, that's all that matters. And we hear
Right.
that postpartum.
Ugh, and it's so dismissive, right?
It's so dismissive and it's so damaging.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's not all that matters. That is incredibly important, but it's not all that matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
How that happened, it plays a significant role. And it doesn't mean that everything's suddenly just okay because the baby's fine now and baby's doing well. And we can just erase the memories of what happened because your body is experiencing that as a trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's unfortunately not a straightforward or simple answer of what to do, but that would be if at 6 weeks you're still feeling quite emotional around that, which is very natural and to be expected, then having a couple of sessions with somebody might be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And therapy doesn't have to look like, I go and see a therapist and I start unpacking everything from my childhood and talking about my mom. For
Right.
some people it does, But for some people, there's a specific trauma or incident that needs to be discussed and sort of talked about and worked through, and then things are okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a long-term relationship necessarily.
Right. I think that's a really great point, is that at what point do you seek out therapy? And then, what does therapy actually look like? Because I know that it becomes something that, since that's your profession, it's like, oh, well, it's just like this. But for many people that they've never experienced therapy before, that's a big, scary thing. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me just, I'm just going to stop screen sharing for a second because I'm going to just move around a little bit here. Can you see me back again? Are we good?
Yeah.
So I mean, as Holly, you and I have talked about this before, that we believe that anybody can benefit from talking to somebody and from therapy. Obviously, I'm quite biased. If you have a large support network, that might be enough. For some, that is enough. But if you are experiencing any symptoms of a perinatal mood disorder, if you've experienced trauma, whether in pregnancy, during your birth, or prior to having a baby, talking to a professional can offer a bit of a different experience and can typically be really beneficial. And that can extend even further into sort of the adapting to this new role and relationship changes and what that means, and navigating family dynamics, or how you sort of your identity now that you're a mom and your world has completely been tipped upside down. So it might be a specific issue like birth trauma, for example. For some people, there's, they have a baby and they think that things are okay because I have a baby now. And then they recognize that their years of infertility might now be showing up in a different way in terms of their emotions, or a previous pregnancy loss, that even though things sort of seemed okay, or it was worked through at that point in time, it can show up at a different point in time. So those are all sort of good reasons to seek out therapy, for sure. And just recognizing that you don't have to struggle alone. So there is a stigma, obviously, that still exists around seeking out professional help, but knowing that if you're able to sort of push through that and to access what you need, then things can feel better. And then who cares what anybody else thinks?
Yeah, exactly.
Really. Because if you don't need to sort of struggle by yourself. There is help, and with intervention, you will feel better. So it's a matter of, like, let's try this sooner than later, essentially. And then what does therapy look like? This is a really great question, because most people that I see, when they reach out, they express fear, absolutely, and uncertainty, because it's again, and it's funny because we see, Netflix has many shows that encompass components of therapy that are quite humorous as well. And it's, there's a certain perception that's put out, for sure, but moms see me for all different reasons, like I talked about. So anything to do with fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, those kinds of things, anxiety around SIDS or health conditions, not feeling like themselves, feeling like they want to end their own lives, feeling like they have these intrusive or recurring thoughts, navigating in-laws. Ding, 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 that's a big one. That's a big one. Overwhelm, feeling like they're not keeping up, you name it. No issue is sort of off the table. And women who come to therapy after having a baby are typically not seeking long-term support. They're reaching out because they need to feel better, and not in 6 months. They need to feel better right now. My first goal always is to work with them to reduce symptoms right away. Because there's no time, as we know, like, you're a new mom, there is no time to not feel like your best self.
Yeah, totally.
Really. So basically, at this point, we meet through a secure online platform or by phone if that feels more comfortable. I'm completely open either way. The first session is typically us getting to know one another. Building a relationship is essential. You have to find the right fit for you. It may not be me for the people that I see, and that's okay. I just want people to know they have support. If I'm not the right fit, I refer you to somebody who is the right fit, because if you're reaching out, you need to speak to find somebody who is the right fit for you and who you feel comfortable with.
Sure.
We have an open dialogue where sort of I encourage you to share as much or as little as you feel comfortable with, so I can get an idea of sort of where things are at for you, all from the comfort and safety of your own house. So in terms of confidentiality, that has really helped people to feel safe. There's no issue of sort of seeing someone in the waiting room or passing somebody in the office. Some women have specific issues they want to focus on each week. I have people who come in with notes taken. I have many others who have no plan about what we're going to talk about, and we go from there. So both are completely normal and completely okay.
Right.
And we sort of in the first couple of sessions just try and determine some goals that you feel like you want to work on, sort of what you're looking for. Some people come and say that I have no idea why I'm here. I just felt like I have to be here. That's completely okay also. And completely normal. So you can expect some relief the first session. It can be really scary to take the first step, but it's super normal and it feels a lot easier, people tell me, after we've met once. Then sort of it just feels much easier. And often just having someone listen to what you're going through can feel like a major relief, an outside perspective.
Totally.
Babies are always welcome. Life is always welcome. I have people nursing during sessions. People get up and deal with toddlers during sessions. That is all welcome and okay. Dogs barking, cats crossing the computer. Everything is okay. I want you to feel as comfortable as you can in the space that we have. I have moms that I talk to on their lunch break who are working, and we do a phone call from the car when they're in the car for lunch. So whatever, I try and be flexible to meet your needs, essentially, as most therapists do as well. So we try and make it as the least scary possible.
So you don't have to like lie on a couch and.
No, I used to have a really big comfy couch, and people would say, this feels really cliche, but can I lie down on it? And I'd say, please go ahead.
Probably a mom then who needed a nap, to be honest.
Absolutely. Come for your hour and sleep. I tell women who were seeing me in person, tell everybody at home that your session is 3 hours, and then you can come for your hour and you can go drive around for 2, right?
That's key right there. That you got to add that to that self-care list right there.
Absolutely.
On how long your session is.
Right. Exactly.
Was there anything that you wanted to go back to on like things, strategies for right now?
I'm just aware of our time. So it might be more helpful for me, maybe if we email out my slides after.
Sure.
Just, I don't want to keep people too late, depending on where you're feeling at that.
I think that we had a question about they came a little bit late, and so they were wondering about your slides too. So if you're comfortable doing that, I'm sure people would appreciate them.
I'm totally okay with that, for sure. And we're recording, so people will be able to see sort of.
We'll have the recording as well. So but if I don't know if you want to like give some closing remarks or like an overview or whatever, however you want to.
No, absolutely. So I know we had talked earlier about the idea around people looking to or wondering when sort of medication or further medical intervention might be recommended. I get this question a lot as well, because people are trying to navigate sort of, what do I do if I'm feeling not like myself? Do I go to my family doctor? Do I call a therapist? Sort of, what's my first step? So it might be helpful just to go through that a little bit in case people are wondering that. But I think there's just recognizing that both therapy and medication have a role for some people, and they don't need to be happening concurrently. But when there is medication that's being prescribed, then it's definitely helpful to also seek out professional intervention through counseling or therapy, just because we want to make sure that you're able to utilize to create some strategies or have a toolbox for when issues are arising, just to help you to take back control of the anxiety or of your mood, so that you can experience lasting success. So we do know, the research tells us that specific types of therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, for example, is as effective or even more effective than medication for perinatal mood disorders. But for some, medication is definitely needed. And I often recommend speaking to your doctor about medication if the strategies that you're trying in therapy aren't working, or you're continuing to feel intense sadness or overwhelm. For some people, medication can help to reduce the fog or just allow your brain to process and relax enough to begin implementing the strategies that we're discussing.
Right.
And I use the metaphor as medication can help some people to feel like they're not pushing a boulder uphill. So they're just walking uphill and the boulder is sort of taken away.
Yeah.
But in saying that, sometimes people have the impression that if they come to therapy and they identify a mood disorder, that I'm immediately going to say, you need to go to your doctor and seek out medication. So that isn't the case. It doesn't always happen. I'm sort of there to help you to assess if what we're doing and what's happening at home for you is enough.
Yeah.
Or if there's a need for something more.
Right.
When mood disorders become really intense, then medication definitely has a role to play. So I think at the end of the day, the best thing to do is to seek out a consultation with your healthcare provider and seek out a referral for professional support kind of concurrently. That's what the research is telling us is sort of the most effective, whether or not you're prescribed medication or not.
Right.
And,
Good point.
yeah. But as final thoughts, I mean, this parenting journey is not easy.
It's not.
And we add in all of the restrictions and what's happening in the world. And it's just complicating things, and it's making us feel more isolated.
Yeah.
And the emotions are coming at us at this rapid pace. And it feels complicated for many postpartum women to experience this immense joy at this new baby and at motherhood.
Totally.
And this overwhelm and this fear and this grief and this worry and all of the other things all at the same time.
And let's maybe just right now acknowledge all of you who are on here right now that have just had a baby during COVID. You were given a bum deal. That's a bum deal.
Absolutely.
It's okay.
Absolutely.
To acknowledge that, and we have to move on from it, but you were dealt a poor hand there.
Poor hand.
That's it's going to have an impact for sure. It's just what I was really hoping tonight could do for some people is let them see that there are tools that you can be utilizing on your own, and there are people that are here in your community still that you can connect with, because I know it's hard. There's, you and I have talked about midwives aren't seeing people in the same way. Your family doctors aren't seeing people. OBs aren't seeing people in the same way. So there's a lot that is falling through the cracks right now. Yeah. And so I so appreciate
what's being asked. It's unreasonable. It's really unreasonable. So we can give you strategies. And at the end of the day, it's what's being asked of you is just not a reasonable request.
Right.
To parent, to have a postpartum period during this time.
These are not normal times. Yeah.
Not normal times. And can we shift our expectations? Can we allow ourselves to be overjoyed and excited and experience grief?
Right.
Over what we lost.
It doesn't have to be an either or.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just reaching out for help to others, professional, non-professional, any support that you can find, please access it. We know that this is not meant to be done in isolation.
No. Yeah. Mothering was never meant. We were supposed to be part of a community.
Yes. So there are things popping up. So however you can, access it. And if you're wondering about resources or how you can connect with others, I'm happy, if you send me an email, I'm happy to point you in different directions. Right. Knowing that we're in Durham region in Ontario. So I'll do my best depending where everyone's from.
Yeah. And for all of you that maybe missed this in the beginning, our email addresses are in the chat box at the top. I think you can scroll back up to it. Okay. Oh, and my helper here, just put them in again so you can copy and paste that if you have any questions for us or need resources. But yeah. So thank you so much. You're totally the best.
Thank you. I wish we could go on for hours. There's just so much that
we probably could. But I really appreciate everyone signing on today, and just know that you do have a community out there. It just takes a little bit more effort to find it at this time because things are weird, but there's people that are out there for you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Bye, Heather.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye.